Our guest tonight is Claire from England. Claire, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Hello, Vic.
Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Okay, I'm 33 years of age. Well, I will be in October. I'm in the UK. I live with my 3 boys and my partner. I'm a qualified beautician. That's what I actually do, but I also studied aromatherapy and natural medicines, because that quite interests me. I wouldn't say I was a wildlife person because I'm not. I do it mainly for my partner's benefit, not my own. And that's about all there is to say, really.
You had an encounter when you were 6 years old. Please tell us about what happened.
Yes, of course. Well, I was 6 years old. Basically, my mum and dad had gone out with my stepdad, and they'd gone somewhere, and my mum's friend were looking after me. She had 2 children, near my age, not quite, but near. It was summer, because the day was beautiful. It was really warm, so I know it was summer, but I couldn't say what month it was, but I know it was summer. And I loved going there because she had a pool and a slide and everything that kids love, really. But I'd never slept there before. I'd never really been away from home before. This was probably the first time I'd actually slept out that wasn't at a family's house. We played all day, and it was nice, and we went to bed. She sent us to bed after a bath, something to eat, and I got to play with the makeup for a bit, which was the first time as well. Never got to do that before, so I'll never forget that day. I think it was around 9 p.m. That was bedtime. They had their own rooms, and they did have 2 spare rooms. They had quite a big house, and I was taken to a spare bedroom in that house. The bedroom itself wasn't great. It just had a little side table with a lamp, a bed. There was nothing up at the windows or anything, because it was literally just a spare room. They hadn't really done anything with it or anything like that. And I got in bed, and I did fall to sleep. Next thing I sort of remember is I woke up, and it was early hours in the morning. I don't remember exact time, but I think it was round about after the 3 a.m. time, I believe, I think. Not very clear on the time, but I know it was early morning. And I couldn't sleep, and I think it's because I was in a strange bed, a strange area, and so obviously I was unsettled anyway. And I thought I'd get out of bed, just randomly go look out the window. I mean, I'm a kid, kids don't usually stay in bed and just stare at the ceiling. It's not something they do. They have to move about and do things. So, as a curious child, I get out of bed and go look out of the window, and I see, well, I think it's a very large doggy, because I'm only 6, so I presume it to be a very large doggy on all 4s. We've always had big dogs growing up. We've always had boxers, and, we've had Alsatians, so I know what a big doggy looks like, but I thought this doggy was extremely big, and I can tell you it was on all 4s. It was in the moorland. Now, there was the ladies' garden, and then there was the moors, but in the moors there was also like a lane, and I believe, when I've looked into it, it's actually a bike track where people can walk up or take the bikes for a ride, and either side, left and right, there were woods, there were woodland. This lady does still live there, so I can't give you the area, I'm afraid. She doesn't want that. She wants nothing to do with it, but yeah, so it was quite an open space, and it was a full moon, and it was shining down on the big doggy, as I thought it was. I'm watching it, and it moves, and it's like when a dog's been asleep and it wakes up and it's been cramped, it sort of stretches, and it made that sort of movement, and it was sort of sniffing the air. And I'm like, wow, that is such a big doggy. Who's left their big doggy out there? Never thinking anything about it at first. I really didn't, because at 6 I wasn't allowed to watch scary movies. My mum never allowed me to watch them until I was 16. So nothing like, I've never known anything scary or any monsters or nothing. My mum wasn't like that. She wouldn't let me read books or look at things. So to me, this was a big doggy in the middle of the field, and I wondered why someone had left the big doggy out there. And then it noticed me. And that's when everything changed. Because it started to stand on 2 legs, and when it did so, it was looking at me. Now, I don't know how it knew I was there. I was behind a window. There was at least 70 more feet between us, looking back, and I don't know how it knew I was there, but it did. But when it looked at me, The only way I can describe it is as though it was looking straight through me. Like it knew my soul, it knew everything, and it wouldn't. The eye contact was locked. It was very much locked, and it was the scariest, most horriblest feeling I've ever had in my life. And I didn't break eye contact with it, I don't think, because I was so scared. And being so young, I didn't know what to do. I was frozen on the spot. And it looked at me as it was standing up. It did not stand up with smoothness. That's something that I noted. It stood up like it weren't structured to stand on two legs, but yet it could. And once it had stood up on the two legs, it casually turned away and it walked towards, it was the left side of the woods. It walked towards that tree line, and I watched it walk the whole way, and the walk was so weird. It was, I can't really explain it, but I mean, it was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life, and the way it looked at me, I'll never get over that, ever. Ever. It terrified me, and it still terrifies me to this day.
There's no way to prepare yourself for something like that.
No, especially at 6 when monsters don't exist, and I never watched a werewolf film or anything like that. I didn't still until I was 16, so it's not something I was accustomed to. At all.
I can only imagine. When you think about the fact that most of the people you know haven't had a dogman encounter, they don't even know that they exist, do you feel a bit of jealousy creeping in?
Yeah, definitely. I wish I never knew. People who want to go and see one, they don't understand. They really don't. I wish I'd never, ever, ever seen that thing, ever. When I saw it, it was black. And the moon was shining on it, but all I could see was black, and I could not see any eye shine or anything. Honestly, it was just, everything that I saw was black. And it did remind me of my American Akita, but much, much bigger. But yeah, I don't remember any other colour than black.
In that part of England, how are things like dogmen and Bigfoot looked at?
They're frowned upon most of the time. You can't talk to anybody because no one will believe you. They believe they don't exist here. No, all that stuff's only in America. They have all the problems and we've got nothing here to worry about, and there's no way I could tell anyone. And I didn't that night. I ran into their room because I was scared, but I told them I had a bad dream and I never mentioned it again. And I wasn't going to because it just felt wrong to say what I'd seen. And at 6, that's strange because a child usually blurts everything. You know, they usually go to someone straight away, but this just, the way it looked at me, as if it were telling me it was wrong. It made me feel like it was wrong to tell someone, and I never did. But even if I had, Vic, I would have probably been put in a asylum or something, to be honest.
You know, it's such a shame when you see something like that, and you can't even tell people around you that might be able to help. It's almost like a prison without walls. I hate that.
It is horrible, yeah.
Have you heard of anyone else in your area of England, or England period, having a dogman encounter?
No. I'm not saying there isn't any, but it's whether they talk about it or not. That's what faults it. They don't come forward. If they do, they don't come forward.
Like I told you in the pre-interview, I've gotten quite a few messages from people in the UK almost laughing about the fact that they don't have any dogmen over there, or at least they thought that they don't.
We do. Yes, we do.
Yeah, from what I understand, that's one of the reasons why you were nice enough to come on and do this interview, was to help get the word out to people in the UK that they are in fact over there.
Yes, they are. They're very elusive, but they are over here. And no, they are not friendly.
Other than your husband and son, does anyone else in your family know about these encounters you've had?
No. No one. I wouldn't tell anyone.
Given the attitude over there that you mentioned, I can't say I blame you for not coming out and telling other people about that.
I never will.
Yeah, I can't say I blame you there. What kind of changes have you made in your life as a result of these encounters you've had and continue to have?
Well, because of where I live now, I'm having quite a bit of trouble. I won't go camping. I won't go out in the woods. I will not go anywhere where I think they could be or where I know that they are. Even where I think they could be, I don't go. I do keep to busy areas, even though I know for a fact that slightly busy areas, if it's not too busy, it doesn't actually bother them, believe it or not, they will still come. So I try and stay where there's people. There's no way I would walk anywhere on my own. No, it changed everything, because I wouldn't go camping, I wouldn't go on school trips if they were going on camping. I wouldn't do anything like that, nothing. And I still won't today. I will not go camping. I can't. I'm so terrified. I can't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. And then, the nightmares that I have, I'm on medication to help me sleep, because otherwise I have quite a lot of nightmares, or I can't sleep because I'm scared to have a nightmare. So it changes everything you know about life. It changes it. It changes it so much.
Please tell us about the sighting you had with the 3 large dogs in that farmer's field.
Yes, I shall. I also would like to say that the sighting that I had when I was 6, I didn't know it was a dogman. I didn't find out about dogman until I came across your show, which was a few months ago. At 16, I had watched American Werewolf in London. I thought I'd seen a werewolf, but it wasn't until a few months ago I came across your show and I realised that's what I actually saw. And I just want people to know about that. I didn't know these existed until a few months ago, that that's what they were. I thought they were werewolves, But our property is right on the edge. So it's a very hen house with a very large garden, and at the side of our garden are cornfields, and there's about 4 cornfields. One right outside of my house, and then a few that go further back. As it goes further back, it gets higher, so it's like up on a hill. So you can stand them in my garden, and you can see the other fields quite easily. And then there's a green field. In this green field, there were cows. And we hadn't lived in the property very long then. We've only been here a year anyway, and I think we'd only been there a couple of months. And we were in the garden, and we were just looking at the view, admiring it, as you do. And we noticed these 4 really big dogs. But this is about a mile away. So I say big dogs, I'm saying they were the same size as the cows, which is unusual for dogs to be that size. Now, we didn't have any binoculars or anything like that, so we had to use his brain, and we had to look through a scope to see what I was looking at. And my son was there with me as well, and he's 13. And we're looking through this scope, and we see these huge black dogs. They were massive. They were the size of the cows. Surely dogs don't get that big. And the only predator we have around here, as we know, is foxes. That's all we have is foxes. So we know it weren't a wolf or a bear or anything like that. But it was really strange, because we were watching the behaviour, and there was 2 that were quite big, but the other one was smaller, but still big for small, which was strange. And they were plaguing the cows. They were sort of circling them, and then they'd stop, and then they'd circle again, and then they'd stop. I thought, well, the farmer's daft. The farmer's going to get he's letting them dogs in that field with them cows, and his cows are going to end up dead. So I didn't think anything about it. I thought, fine. Now, my next door neighbour's friends with the farmer, because she was a farmer herself. And I just happened to mention to her the next day, after this happened, I said, does the farmer have any dogs? And why does he let them in the field? And why does he let them plague the cows? And she said, the farmer doesn't have any dogs. He did have some dogs. He had some Jack Russells. And I said, no. I said, these were big black dogs, pointy ears, more the size of the cow, these dogs. And she said, he doesn't have any dogs. Now, I don't know if they were dogmen or not. They definitely are in that area. I know that. So possibly it could have been, and there could have been tormenting the cows, yes, because the farmer definitely does not have any dogs.
Did you watch those 3 huge dog-like creatures until they went back into the woods, or how did that end?
And then it just ended where I just thought, well, the farmer's crazy. Never really thought much else about it. I mean, I had my encounter when I was 6, and it's been many years since then. So I didn't think this would ever happen again. I thought it was something that was one-off. It wouldn't happen to me again. So no, I didn't. I didn't read anything into it at first. It was only when, because like I said, they were the same size as a cow, so they were pretty big. And my initial thought of wolves, and that's not possible. We haven't got wolves here. We've only got foxes. So I know they weren't wolves. So the only explanation I could have thought were dogs. And when I asked about the farmer having dogs, he doesn't have any dogs. And when he did have dogs, he only had little Jack Russells. So we're not sure what they were.
At first, when you saw those 3 huge dog-like beings, you said you were going through your thought process, trying to figure out what they could be. When you found out that that farmer didn't have dogs at any time after that point while you were standing there, did you have a flashback to that encounter that you had when you were 6?
No, I had a nightmare. The day after, when I found out he didn't have any dogs, that's when the nightmares started coming back. I thought I'd got rid of them. That's what happened. And only then did I start thinking, could it be them? Could it be one of them? Could it be 3 of them? I don't know. So it was the nightmares that brought the thought back, I think, rather than the actual seeing of them. Because I was convinced, no, it's got to be dogs, it's got to be dogs. You know, you do, you sit and you try and convince yourself that it's not what you think it is. You know, it's something else.
When you see something like that you just can't explain, it's only natural that it's going to throw you for a loop. You mentioned that night that nightmares started up. At that point, did the nightmares continue from then all the way up to present day with your current problem sleeping, or when did they start?
It wasn't that actual night. I didn't get to speak to the neighbour till the next day. So it was the night after that the nightmare started, and yes, they did continue, yes.
You went on a walk deep into a nearby woods and had a strange experience. Please fill us in on what happened.
We like to walk as dogs sometimes, and because we've moved to this area, there's a canal, and it leads into a river, and there's streams, and it is beautiful. I can't deny how beautiful it is, because it is. And there's a mile walk that everybody walks the dog. There's always people there walking the dog, but we're quite fit, and we decided we wanted to do more miles, so we just carried on walking, and we crossed a little road, and we crossed into a different area where you don't actually see many people there at all. Well, we never saw anybody there when we were walking there. So where other places you see people passing you all the time, we just thought we'd carry on walking. So we did. We carried on walking. We had one dog with us at the time, which was my white boxer, and it was fine, and we could hear the birds, and it was very beautiful. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. All I know, it was like walking over a line that you couldn't see. It was like coming from one place to another place, and everything just dropped dead silent. And I was frightened, of course, for fear, and I was like, why is it so quiet? I don't understand. And, you know, I couldn't understand where the birds had gone. I couldn't understand why I couldn't hear no frogs. It was like stepping over an invisible line, and it was silent, and I can't get over that. I can't, because it was literally from so much noise, a split second, nothing. And it scared me. It scared me a lot, and I haven't been back there since. I'm not going back there either.
Yeah, I can't say I blame you for not going back. Do you believe that your problems on your property and around your property, do you think they started as a result of that experience you had way back there in the woods, or what?
I believe, this is my honest belief, that I entered their area. Yes, I did get a picture of them in their area. No, I am not publishing it because I don't want it scrutinised, because that's all it will get. It's private for me only, and they are in that area. That is a definite, and I believe because I went into their area, they decided to pay me a visit too.
Yeah, once you get on their radar, they seem to be a lot more likely to pay you a visit, or visits, unfortunately, as you're finding out there. Not long after that experience, you woke up one morning to find out that something had raided your chicken coop in the night. What did you find?
A week and a half after this happened, they were actually my partner's chickens, and my partner's ducks. I stick with dogs, and he likes his... Basically, he did have 46 to begin with, I asked. He had 46, because he deals with them. I don't really usually deal with them. But this particular morning, he went out. Bear in mind, we heard no noise in the night, nothing at all. And he shouted at me, and I knew there was something wrong. And I came out, and I was like, well, what's the matter? And you would not believe the mess. We now only have 18 chickens, because the rest were destroyed. They were everywhere. The hay, the straw, the feathers, everything was absolutely everywhere. It was awful. And even if we could count the chickens that we lost, we wouldn't have been able to, because it was such a mess that it was unrecognisable if any had been eaten, gone, or if they'd just been destroyed.
Did you ever hear any strange sounds that night when all this was going on?
No. No. All I had was my Akita. Sometimes he'll no growl, but he's 1 year old and he's at that age where he's very protective anyway, so like silly me, I don't always listen to him, and I probably should, but I don't, because he can get overexcited about the smallest noises. I've seen it in him when a paper bag's rattled on something and he's gone off on one, so I thought, when he does make them noises, I don't always listen to him, and I probably should. And I don't. I remember him growling at some point, and I just thought, oh, Lilo, shut up, and I just went back to sleep. The most strangest thing about that incident, though, and you might think, well, that's strange enough, is that the chicken's enclosure was on a latch. Whatever did this, and bear in mind we've only got foxes, and the foxes can't get in because it's concreted on the bottom, so if they dug through, they would hit concrete. They wouldn't be able to get in. Whatever had done it had stepped over the 4-foot fence, leaving no marks whatsoever into their enclosure, and had lifted the latch on the enclosure.
As if dogmen weren't scary enough on their own just because of the way they look and the way they handle themselves, the idea that they can manipulate latches and doorknobs the way they seemingly can, that sure puts it over the top.
Oh God, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, there are people that live way out in the middle of nowhere that, as a result of hearing about that, have contacted me and told me about how that's affected them. They used to love being able to leave their doors unlocked and whatnot, but now that they know that these things can apparently manipulate latches and doorknobs like that, they lock it down big time, and I can't say I'll blame them.
My house is locked down, the windows are all closed, and I'll be absolutely honest with you. Even though it does give me peace of mind doing that, if they wanted in, they would get in.
Oh, sure, as big and powerful as they are, I'm sure the windows or whatever you've got trying to keep them out wouldn't be an obstacle. It's a scary thought.
It is very scary, and that's why we lock it down, because it gives me the peace of mind.
Please tell us about the day you saw that big one at the edge of the wood line.
Oh, this one was huge compared to the rest. It's about 1/4 of a mile across the cornfield. And as I say, you stand in our back garden, because it slopes up, you can see what's happening. You've just got the view of everything, really. It's quite nice. And there's an edge line, and then it goes into the woods. But in this particular edge line, there's an opening where it's clear, and you can just see grass through it. But this time, I did not see grass through that opening. This was huge. This was definitely a dogman, no question. It was on 2 legs. It was stood in that opening with its snout like into the air, sort of up into the air, like it was sniffing the air, I suppose. And it had one hand on one of the bushes, sort of leaning against it, and the other one down. And I think it was down by its knee, and that's what you would call it, I'm not sure. Again, it was black. I couldn't see the eyes, it's the distance, I just know it was black, it was big, it was still on 2 legs, and I'm not sure if it was sniffing the air, because it caught a scent of something, or whether it was making its back towards where I am, I don't know. But I have heard noises on a night. Of course I have. I've heard scratching on the wall, and I've heard something on my roof, so I'm not sure what that is, because what would get on my roof, I don't know. This one was really big. This one was huge compared to the others, for definite. It was horrible. It was horrible and so frightening that it was that close. That's too close for comfort.
How far away was this dog man?
It's about a quarter of a mile, where the hedging is, and then the opening. I would say definitely about a quarter of a mile, so any eyes I couldn't really tell. I mean, I could see the outline, the pointy ears. I could see, because its arm were resting, it had it sort of resting on one side of the hedge, and its other down, I could see where its arms were, and I could see it definitely had canine legs, definitely. They weren't human in no way. They looked like my dog does when he walks, when he's up, and he's doing tricks. You know, they were the same shape. And the only reason why I could see how the snout was because he was sort of, his head was up like he was sniffing the air, so it was like tilted. And that gave me a view of the snout. But I couldn't see any intricate details because I was just too far away to see them, unfortunately. So I can't tell you anything on that, I'm afraid.
While you were standing there watching this dog man, did it ever give you the impression that it knew you were there?
Honestly, Vic, I froze. Because my son was seeing it with me, and he's 13-year-old. So I didn't think about that at the time. I just sort of froze, got scared, and got me and my son in the house. So it may have done, but at that moment in time, I just remember freezing. I'm pretty sure it did, but I just wanted to get me and my son in the house. That was the first thing on my mind.
When you see something like that, no one could fault you for just wanting to get out of there, to remove yourself from the situation.
And especially because my son was there, it made it worse. You know, you protect your children for anything else, so.
You've had a lot of animals turn up missing, Claire. We've touched on that, but we haven't gone into all that much detail. Please elaborate on that.
Well, firstly, I won't tell you about our goose and duck situation. We had 4 geese and 10 ducks, and we came out one day, and this wood panelling had been taken off by hand, so I can't say it was one of them, but the panelling had basically been ripped off, and whatever had done it had taken. We've now only got 1 goose and 7 ducks, so, you know, it had taken a few of those, whatever it was. Also, when I moved around here, I had 2 cats. And I've been in a year, and my cat's been missing, coming up to 4 weeks now, my black cat. And because she was missing, obviously I went down the street asking people, have you seen a black cat? And I've not really spoke about anything like this, and they were saying, oh, not yours as well. And I'm like, what do you mean? Not mine as well. I'm like, she's just somewhere, we'll just need to find her. And they're like, no, they're not come back. And obviously I wanted to elaborate on this, and I said, well, why? And she said, well, round here, it's known for stray cats. There used to be about 9, possibly more, and everybody on the street had come together and feed them because they used to keep the rodents down. Because we had made so many fields, it's good to have the cats to, you know, keep the rodents clear and everything else. And apparently, they've just been going missing and never coming back. And unfortunately, my cat's gone. It's nowhere to be seen. I don't know where she is. She wouldn't just leave because she just had kittens, and the kittens were only 2 weeks old. She was a very good mum, and I had to unrear the kittens because we couldn't find her, and we still haven't found her today. But according to everybody on the street, it's not the first time, it won't be the last time that a cat disappears. So that's disturbing.
Yeah, that can be easy to deal with. From what I understand, there was another cat in the area that showed up skinned.
Yeah, that's right. That was my neighbour's cat, but it survived. Because obviously I was talking to my neighbour about my cat, and she said, my cat, you'll never believe, it actually survived when I tell you this, and she elaborated on it, and she said, basically, a cat were a tomcat, so it was always out and about, doing what it needed to do. It'd come home, it'd eat, and then it'd go out again strolling. And this one time she was in the house and a cat comes running and it's practically skinned. The cat is practically skinned and it has 3/4 of its tail missing, it just has a stump. She rushes it to the vet. It has to have intensive care and everything. Now the vets sew it back together. They sew the cat back together. They obviously they can't save its tail because its tail's not there. And they said that it was done with one swift movement, and they put it down to people doing it. Now, if a person would have done this, I would have imagined that cat would not have stayed still long enough for him to do that, and to do it so precise. But they put it down to a person doing it. I don't believe that for a second at all. This cat was practically skinned, and they saved it. Unfortunately, it's passed away now, due to old age, but it was remarkable that they managed to save the cat and that it managed to get home when it had been practically skinned.
As far as the dogmen go that you've seen, Claire, do they all look the same as far as proportions go, or do they look different?
There's only one that were different, and I didn't see it with my naked eye. I actually caught it. I was taking random pictures and I got home, and it was on there, and I'll be honest with you, it's not the same as the others. It's not. Its snout is not prominent. It's not as elongated. It's got a more shorter one, but it did have a pup with it, so it means they're breeding. Now, I couldn't see its legs because it was under, it was like a big, big old oak tree or something, and it had been hollowed out and turned on its side. And it was under there. It was like sort of on all fours, because you can tell it's on it. It couldn't be stood up, otherwise it wouldn't be right. And it was under there, and it was with its pup, and that was the only one that I've seen that was completely different to the others.
Did that one have canine-style legs?
I couldn't see them, Vic. I couldn't see the legs. It being under the tree, and it was that dark under where it was actually. It was just all blended into darkness, unfortunately, and I couldn't tell.
Tell us about the pup that you saw with it.
Oh, wow. The pup looked like a dog. I thought that sounds absolutely crazy. But the one thing that I did note, the pup seemed to have eye shine, and it was amber, which was strange because I'd never noticed any eye shine before, at all. And I'll be honest with you, Vic, I couldn't tell if it was stood or if it was on all fours. That I could not tell you. It definitely had a snout. Little pointy ears. It wasn't very big. It wasn't very big at all. I think it was probably the size of, what dog could I compare it to? A Staffy or a Pit Bull. That's about the size it was. But it didn't have such a prominent muzzle. It definitely had one, but not a big one.
Yeah, that had to be one heck of a sight to see. You don't hear about the small ones very often at all, but they've got to be out there, just like pigeons. How often have you seen a baby pigeon? Through the course of all these encounters you've had, can you recall ever hearing any sounds that they've made or smelling anything?
I don't recall any smell, for definite. I would notice. I've got a keen sense of smell, and no, I don't recall a smell. Sounds. I've not heard many, and the ones that I've had heard, I don't know if they're meant to sound like that, because it sounded something like it didn't sound like an owl, it sounded like screaming. Like someone screaming. And I've heard sounds that sound like crying from a young child or a baby, and those sounds don't sound like they should come from them. I don't know. That's the only sounds I've ever heard. And I'm not sure if it's from them or not, because I don't know what they sound like.
You were telling me about that in the pre-interview, that one day when you heard that sound that sounded like a mix between a woman's screaming and a baby's cry. Tell us more about that if you don't mind.
It was just one night, and I regularly am in the back, well, I say it's a back, it's actually supposed to be front, but I call I'm opposite. I was in the bedroom, and I've got a room where I have my art stuff because I like to draw, and I've got a computer in there and things. And I had the window open slightly, and I was away with fairies, daydreaming, painting, and I didn't realise it had gotten slightly dark outside. So I'd left the window open, and usually I would have closed it by this time. And all I heard, it was like a screaming, and I mean screaming, but it was like echoing because it was coming from right up in the woods. You could see that, and other people on the street heard it too, and they put it down to someone playing a practical joke. But when it ended, it went into like a cat crying, baby crying sort of sound, and then it'd do it again, but at the same time it'd have that scream, and then it'd have like this wail, it's like horrible. Like when cats fight, sometimes they sound like babies, and I weren't sure, maybe it's cats fighting, maybe someone is screaming, but everybody in the street said no, there's somebody playing a joke. And anyway, I listened, there were people still on the street, it weren't completely dark, there was still some light, not loads, but there was still some, and everybody just said, oh, it's someone playing a joke, just ignore it. And I've never heard anything since, so if it was them, then, oh my God, they sound horrible.
Yeah, I'm sure that no sleep was had that night when you heard those kind of sounds.
I do manage to get to sleep with my tablets. Sometimes I wake up due to nightmares, but other than that, I do manage to, the tablets do usually make me, I will fall to sleep with the tablets. It's just if I have a nightmare and I wake up, I can't get back to sleep.
You mentioned the dogs that you've got around. Have these dogmen ever messed with them or left them alone?
Right, I never leave my dogs outside because of that reason, Vic. I've never left my dogs outside, ever. If they're outside, one of us is outside, and on the night we bring them in. So, not that I know of, no. I'll not leave my dogs unattended at any time.
Given your situation, I'm glad that you do keep a close eye on them like that, because if you didn't, since they seem to be so thick around there, I'm sure something probably would happen to one or all of your dogs.
Yeah, that's why I don't. I just can't do that to them.
I'm glad you do that. About 3 weeks ago, some horrible noises woke you and your son up. Please tell us about that.
Well, there was only me and my son at the time, and I can't remember if he heard him first or I heard him first. I just remember we were both in his bedroom together, and I think he heard him first. He said, Mum, there's been scratching, which I didn't hear. I was asleep. But he heard scratching, like on the walls. What would be scratching at the walls, Mum? Maybe it's a cat, Josh. Maybe, or it's a fox because it can't get to the chickens. It's decided it's going to scratch at the walls. But then, and it was really strange, it happened in 3 successions, and it was just like bam, bam, bam. But the noise echoed like it was coming from every direction. You couldn't pinpoint where that noise was coming from. It was just bam, bam, bam. And I don't know what it was to this day. And I asked people, because my original thought, maybe it's the neighbours messing with something, you think things like that. It could be a neighbour, it could be anything. But the noises that you hear on the roof, when a cat jumps on a shed roof, sometimes to get down, they'll put the claws in and just scrape. That's what it sounds like. It's like a all the way down, like something's scraping on there. And it's absolutely horrendous. And I thought, someone's messing with us. Someone's got to be messing with us. I tried to rationalise it. I always do try to rationalise it, I think. Now, the neighbours thought it was us making the noise, and it wasn't. And I do believe it was them. Not that I can prove it. We're currently in the process of getting CCTV fitted front and back, and spotlights, because we have no lights or anything, so there's nothing stopping them from coming at the moment. And these bangs and these scratches and this scraping, it happens. I think we've had it a few times while we've been here, and I've just sort of tried to pass it off as something, or one at neighbours, but I'm absolutely terrified.
Oh, I don't think anyone could blame you. When you hear those scratching noises on the metal roof, does it sound like they're using their claws to try and gain purchase to keep from falling off, or what do you think?
My roof's tiled. It's tiled. It's very slippy tiles. So possibly, Vic, I don't know. I don't intend on sticking my head out the window to look either at what they're doing. No, thank you. I'll just leave them be. I know that we've had a few tiles come off the roof, and we found them in the morning on the grass. Unsure of why they're there. Then we've had to have them replaced. We've had to do that a couple of times, actually. So whatever they are doing, they seemingly knock tiles off, and they end up on the garden, and we end up having to replace them.
In the pre-interview and before that, Claire, we've spent a fair amount of time talking about these unique nightmares that you've been having and continue to have. In most dreams, when you fall off a building or someplace high, right before you hit the ground, you normally wake up. With you, your dreams are different. They're unique. Tell us about these dreams and why they're so bad.
Okay. Basically, in these dreams, there's usually 2 or more dogmen. They are the canine type. They are black, and they are chasing me, and it's usually through a wooded area or a dirt path. It never usually changes. It's very much the same, repeating itself. Now, the problem with this dream is I don't get away. I never get away. They get me, and they rip me to shreds every time.
You know, Claire, there's another eyewitness that's had the exact same type of nightmares that you just mentioned. Every night, almost, he has the same horrible nightmare where he's running from a dog man or from dog men, plural. They catch him and they tear into him, rip him apart. It's just horrible. I thought it was just an isolated circumstance. If it's of any comfort, like I told you in those conversations, you're not the only one that has these very vivid but strange nightmares.
It is comforting, as horrible as that sounds. It is.
It sure makes you wonder what in the world's behind all that. That is so strange. From what you said, though, after our conversations, you are doing better as far as those nightmares go.
Yes. Now I've opened up and spoke to someone I know is not going to laugh at me, that I know understands me. I am starting to feel better, yes.
Well, that's such good news. When you started going down the list of all these things that have happened to you and continue to happen to you, you just seem to be under siege by these things, and I feel so sorry that you have to go through this, but I'm so glad at the same time from talking to you that you said recently it's gotten a lot better.
Since we had our conversation and you made me feel much, much better. It has gotten better, it definitely has.
Is there any particular reason why you think you've been having all of these encounters and problems with dog men?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it makes you feel singled out. It makes you feel, what have I done? I must have done something to deserve this. Why me? I ask myself these questions every day, and I have no answers. So.
Yeah, it is a really hard situation to figure. Sometimes there is no good answer, it just happens, and in your situation, I think that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Now understand, Claire, I'm not judging you, I'm just asking here, why haven't you thrown in the towel and moved into the middle of town?
Because my partner, he needs to be near country. I can't elaborate on it, unfortunately, I'm not allowed, but he likes to hunt, things like that, and I love him, and I'll follow him wherever he goes. And to be honest, before I moved to this address, I didn't really have all of the problems that I've got now, and I've only been here a year, and I've got a house that I want, with land that I want. I really don't want to have to move. I've only been here just over 12 months. I don't want to have to go. I don't want to be scared out of my home. This is my home. It's what I wanted. It's why I'm here. And that's something I feel very strongly about. It is not moving.
Well, I hope it never gets to the point where you do have to move. It sounds like you really like that property and living there. Do you think that maybe your problems with these things are over, or what?
I wish I knew. Probably not. Probably not. But I wish there were. But I don't think so. No, I don't think they've done yet.
Well, even if it is a situation where your encounters with these things aren't over, I think after our conversations, you should be in a better position to deal with it.
Definitely, I've not had any strange noises for a while around the house and things, so yeah, I am more confident.
You blew me away. I never will forget the first time that we spoke about your situation there. I couldn't believe when you told me the next day that you had been out in the garden working, everything was going well, you had a
Yes,
good night's sleep that
I
night.
did.
That
Yeah, I
just
did, yeah.
blew me away.
It felt like a big weight had been lifted, and I just felt relief. It was just relief after concealing this for so long, and then just having that relief that someone knows you're telling the truth. You don't have to, hide it and sugarcoat it because they know, so you don't have to hide anything.
I couldn't believe it. That was such good news to hear. Well, Claire, it's time to wrap the show up. Do you have any closing comments to share?
I do. If anyone has had an encounter and hasn't spoken to anyone, I advise you to speak to Vic because he's awesome at what he does. He's perfect in every way. He's helped me so much. And without this show, I really think I'd be in a worse state now. And I just want people to know that.
I can't tell you how glad I am that you found out about me in whatever capacity I was able to help. That's really good news.
Yeah, it is for me too.
Well, thanks again so much for coming on the show. And by the way, I've got to tell you, I love that accent you've got. That's an amazing accent.
Yeah, I've always liked the American one, so we could switch.
That's the funny part. We don't think we have accents.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me they've commented on my accent, and I'm thinking, what accent? I don't think I've got one, but I guess it's all a matter of opinion on that. But
It is.
like I said, Claire, thanks again so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And like I've told you before, I'm always here. If you ever need any help, please do let me know.
Oh, yes, I definitely will.
Great. Well, have a great night.
You too, Vic.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you. Our guest tonight is Gary Wiggins. Gary, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
How you doing?
Oh, doing great. Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name's Gary Wiggins. I grew up here in East Texas. Spent a lot of time around the Sam Houston National Forest, the Big Thicket, over in Liberty County along the Trinity River, river bottoms, and the upper reaches of San Jacinto River. And been an archaeologist by trade for, I guess, 30 plus years, and been involved in a lot of interesting excavations of historic and prehistoric sites all across the country. Some as far afield as Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. I worked up there for a while for Century Research back in the early 80s, and that's, I guess, pretty much what I've done all my life. You know, I've been involved over doing work at the San Jacinto battlefield, working for the state. And also, I worked with the famous singer, songwriter Phil Collins, drummer for the rock group Genesis. He was involved in, and he's always been really interested in Texas history and Texas Revolution. And he asked me to be involved in a dig he had going on under a building that he bought that was adjacent to the Alamo. And they found a lot of interesting artifacts and things pertaining to the siege of the Alamo. And I'm actually even pictured in a book he came out with called The Alamo and Beyond, you know, The Collector's Journey. So that's the whole ball of wax right there.
Well, that's really interesting. I didn't know that about Phil Collins being that interested in archaeology. Tonight's show is going to focus mainly on the Sam Houston National Forest. You mentioned the Sam Houston. What can you tell us about that place?
Well, Sam Houston National Forest has always been a intriguing place for me. It's a fairly large park or forest that stretches. It's kind of I guess a kidney shaped, or well, that's maybe not quite the. It's kind of I'd say a horseshoe shaped area that stretches across two counties, or at least touches two counties, and there's a lake called Lake Conroe, which a good portion of the lake is actually inside the national forest. It's kind of protects that watershed. The water goes on down and furnishes water for the city of Houston. The forest itself is pretty vast. They have a 100-mile long hiking trail or nature trail that goes from one end of the forest to the other, and there's some really nice developed campgrounds that the park has put in there. Some that overlook the lake and others that do not, some that are kind of primitive, and then others that are fairly well modernized with water tap and electrical outlets and all that kind of stuff, public bathroom, stuff like that. And it has a really large population of wild game. There's deer that can be seen there, and mountain lions, various other things, lots of wild hogs. So on the one hand, it can be a peaceful place when you go there, but it also has a kind of a dark side to it, a kind of a hostile side to it that I can say that everything in that forest will either bite you, stab you, or stick you.
If it wasn't for that dark, dangerous side of the park, it would be one heck of a place to go. Unfortunately, you can't have one without the other, so.
Right, absolutely. It's a fun place to explore. When I was younger, we started out Boy Scout trips up there, and then that graduated into actually going with my friends, going on deer hunting trips. And in the early days, there wasn't a lot of rules and regulations. So, heck, if we had a Jeep or a vehicle and wanted to strike off through the woods, we'd find somewhat of a trail. It wouldn't be necessarily a road. We'd just strike off back in there and just find us a place to camp and just have a whale good time. But now they've really tightened their belt on allowing you to do some of that kind of stuff. You got to stick to established roadways, and there's some areas that they've made off limits to camping or whatever. You have to sometimes you have to check in with the park headquarters and find out what's off limits and what's not off limits.
Well, there's not a controversy behind every tree, but considering what's happened in and around that park, it sure does make you wonder why they've deemed some areas to be off limits. But that's all stuff that we can get into later on in the show. Now, I know you had an encounter in 1977 there, Gary. We're going to cover that later on in the show, but before we get into that, have you had any other interesting experiences there in the park?
I've been into the park several times with my friend Mike Woolley, and we've had several encounters with Bigfoot-like creatures. We had one that we think was a juvenile that shot across the road in front of us, broad daylight. It was on all fours when it went across, kind of a dark reddish brown color, and a kind of a roundish head. We only saw a glimpse of it, but there was a large herd of deer that we saw that was actually on the side of the road and crossed in front of us, and in a somewhat of a hurry. And there was like a bridge, a small bridge, or some kind of little creek or something, a little bridge went across there, and it was kind of a state highway there, and this thing shot across the road after the deer. You know, it could very well have been a dog man, or it could have been a squatch. You know, we didn't get to really see it. It moved so fast. This thing was hunkered down close to the road. I mean, it just like lightning went across. But it wasn't a hog. It wasn't a wolf or a coyote or any other animal like that. This one was had large hindquarters or legs, and a rounded head, and it looked far different than anything we'd seen out there. Sure, it certainly wasn't a deer. The other experience we had was we were given a tour by Bob Garrett and his son, and we went down to the tore up camp. And when we arrived on the scene, Bob was giving everybody kind of a tour around the actual site of the camp. And my knee was giving me a lot of trouble. I hurt my knee sometime back, and so I stayed with my truck. And Mike's wife was with us. She stayed back with their vehicle, and we were just kind of talking, the two of us. And I just at that particular point, I had just an extreme eerie feeling. I don't know how to explain it other than just a sensation that something wasn't right. And I took several photographs in various directions. Bob and Mike and his son and another woman had traveled down the trail leading south away from the tore camp, kind of back in that area. And I turned around 190 degrees, and I shot across the front of my pickup truck, took a picture. And in this photograph, you can clearly see a face or a head looking out in a real thick bunch of vegetation about 50 feet behind us. And then there's several other black discolorations or whatever showing through in that vegetation. And it's very obvious. You could see the face of this thing, but I thought it was his body showing through, and he was extremely tall. Mike Woolley sent that photograph to a guy that does analysis of photographs. He's got some kind of computer program that examines the picture pixel by pixel, basically. Vegetation produces a certain color, and animal life produces a certain color on it. And where he didn't say, yeah, that's a Bigfoot, he said there's something there. He said more than that, there's like 4 or 5 somethings there. And he says they're all looking out through that vegetation at me, you know. And then, I mean, it made me to the point to where I got nervous. I had broke my rule when I go into a place like this. Now this, to get to where this area is shoot, it's 5 or 6 miles back in there and off of any kind of road. And it just dead ends, and I had parked my vehicle facing at the end of the road or the cul-de-sac. You never do that. I always, when I go into a place like that, always immediately turn my vehicle around, because if you have to get out of there in a hurry, you don't want to be having to turn your vehicle around. And I even, in my nervousness, I even actually backed into a tree, turning the thing around, you know. And of course, on the way out, I only got a glimpse of it, but on the way out, there was like 3 vehicles were spaced out because of the dust. It was a very dry day. Bob and them were in the front, was in the vehicle ahead of us. They stopped up on the ridge. They stated they actually saw a Bigfoot actually stepped out along this ridge and was standing there looking at him, you know, watching him. And I'm several car lengths back, and I got a glimpse of something that looked large and dirty and black, and it just kind of stepped behind a tree, but it was moving kind of up to the top of the ridge, or it was kind of going up to where Bob and them saw it, I guess. So I just saw a slight movement there, you know. And but that was our experience that day. when we went back in there. Camping in the Sam Houston National Forest, and we're talking about going back in the days when I was in the Boy Scouts and stuff. We used to go to some clear cuts up there where they had done some logging, and you know, there'd be 20 or 30 or 40 of us, and you know, at nighttime the woods just become very active, you know, and there's howls and screams and things that go on out there in the woods that just scare the pants off of you, you know. If you've ever watched the movie Jurassic Park, where the anthropologist and the two kids, they end up spending the night in the jungle with all those prehistoric monsters running around. In the background, you can hear all the sounds and all that. It's very reminiscent of what you see on TV. I mean, there's stuff out there that make noise that, man, you just, you wring your hands and say, what in the world, you know, maybe I shouldn't be out here, you know. And surely not be out there without a gun, I can tell you that.
I can only imagine. Now, in 1977 there, Gary, you had that encounter I alluded to earlier. Please tell us about what happened.
It was about, I would say, I'm trying to think, it was around, I'm trying to remember, April or May. I had a girlfriend that liked to go camping, but she hadn't done it a lot. And we decided, I had found a place, I guess a year before, I kind of scouted it out, but there's a highway that transects the Sam Houston National Forest and actually crosses over Lake Conroe, which is a pretty good sized lake. And right before you get to the bridge that actually goes over the lake like you're heading west, there was some people had roughed a trail. I wouldn't call it a road, but it was wide enough you could get a vehicle in there. But there was a kind of a trail that went back in the woods. There's a kind of a little bluff there. And it went back about a mile, and then it turned and ended on the edge of the bluff overlooking Lake Conroe, and it was kind of a clearing there. And you could tell that other people had been there fishing in the past. And there was a remnant of campfire there, you know, ashes and stuff. So it was right about dark, and I had a little Montgomery Ward camp trailer, and a Toyota Land Cruiser, 4-wheel drive Toyota Land Cruiser, about a 73 model. And we decided that we were going to camp out back in there. You call it a little wilderness camping, you know, if you want to call it that, you know. Well, we drove back there, and I turned the vehicle around, and the sun was going down, and we hadn't popped the camper up yet. Those little Montgomery Ward camp trailers back in the day, they had a door along the side. You drop it down, and there was a lot of storage up underneath. And you know, we pulled 2 or 3 chairs out. And it got dark, and I had 2 battery-powered lanterns that I turned on. And I was in the process of pumping up a Coleman lantern, you know. And I think we'd gathered a little firewood around. We hadn't started a fire yet. And my girlfriend was sitting there. And in the woods, especially Sam Houston National Forest, at night, it gets real busy. You know, if you're near water, you hear the frogs and crickets and as well as other noises. There's something always going on in the woods. There wasn't much moonlight, if any at all. There was a reflection. You could see some light over the lake. It wasn't just totally dark, you know, you could look out over the lake. But when you look into the woods, it's just pure blackness. You know, you look up toward the top of the trees, and there was a little light filtering through. You could kind of see up the top of the trees and stuff. But it gets dark. When it gets dark in the Sam Houston National Forest, it gets dark. It gets dark quick. And so we had our lanterns going. I was pumping up a third one, and we're sitting there talking and doing the usual chores, you know. And the good thing was I hadn't popped that camper up, hadn't folded it up yet. It was still attached to my truck. And all of a sudden, everything went dead quiet. It was like there was no wind, no crickets, no frogs, nothing. And I looked at my girlfriend. She looked at me, and I said, "That's kind of weird." Kind of looked around, just silence. And then I heard a crash and then a bang and then a crash and a bang. I mean, real loud. It literally like you were taking those trees out there and just breaking them off or pulling them out of the ground, And we heard something that the only way I can describe it was kind of like a cackle. And then more crashes and bangs, and then something started to, it was like a steamroller or a cement truck, or it was something started, just seemed to be charging through the brush, and it was real thick on various parts around the camp. I mean, there were thick briars and bushes, and the trees themselves were really close together, and whatever it was coming at us. You could literally hear it snorting and breathing, and it was like you part grass. If you go through really deep grass, you can almost see the trees being pushed aside. And my girlfriend, to this day, we're still friends. She always said that she always felt safe with me, but she said when she saw fear in my eyes, she was terrified. And I just looked at her and I said, we gotta go now, And that was the quickest I think I've ever broke camp. We just grabbed our chairs, and I don't even think I turned the lanterns off. We just shoved them into that camper and slammed the door, and I bailed over the top of the tongue and jumped in my Land Cruiser, and she got in on the other side. We fired it up, took off, and I didn't stop till I hit pavement. We were just so frightened.
Do you think that was a dog man or a Sasquatch that came at you that night?
Really, I can't be for sure because I didn't actually visually see it, but after hearing other people's encounters, I think it's a good possibility it could have been a dog man. I've heard of other people up there in and around Sam Houston National Forest encountering these things over the years, and they seem to be more violent than maybe I can't say more violent. I mean, Mike's encounter with a Bigfoot over in Louisiana was pretty frightening in itself, where two of them chased him out of the woods when he was deer hunting. So I would say that there's a very good possibility that could have been a dog man. I heard that there was other people that have actually been attacked around Sam Houston National Forest by these things, what they described as wolf appearance. So it could very well have been just, I didn't stick around long enough to actually see it. My friend Mike told me had I waited around another 4 or 5 minutes, it was going to get very interesting for me. And heck, what it was doing was enough for me to send me packing, I'm just glad my Jeep cranked up, didn't leave me afoot.
Yeah, that would be a bad situation having to spend the night in there with that thing, whatever it was. I do notice some similarities between what happened to you that night and Kirk Stokes' encounter that he talked about having in 1991.
I had heard his interview and just some of the similarities. The fact that he was on a lake and I was on a lake, and I think he made mention where there was a period of time there where things just kind of went quiet for him, and it's anybody's guess what it was, but we don't have any bears to speak of. There might be a few little honey bears that they've released out there. They're very, very small, but they don't break trees off 6 feet above the ground. They don't shut them out of the way or rip them out of the ground. They definitely, when they come to the woods, don't sound like a steamroller coming through there. I mean, what was coming at us was literally just mowing brush, vegetation down. just shoving it out of their way, you know. And it was extremely angry, whatever it was. You could sense that, you know. It did not want us there. I know just south of there, along the lake, an instance here about I guess about 4 years ago. A canoeist. There was a group of people canoeing on the lake, and the guy canoeing, he had beached his canoe there, not that far away from where I had attempted to camp that night in 1977. Now, this is more recent though, and he went into the woods, and after a while he didn't come out, and the other people that were with him, they beached their canoes, and they yelled for him. They went into the woods a little ways. They couldn't find him, so they went and got the authorities. The authorities came back, and they did a search, and they found him several hundred yards back in there, and from what I was told, he was disemboweled, and his arms and legs had been pulled out of their sockets. I believe even his head pulled off. So, and so the story goes, well, it was, he encountered some kind of a, you know, wild animal. It was a wild animal attack, and they left it at that. But, it's just kind of odd, you know. I've seen, mountain lions that's killed deer and one thing and another, and they may maul something, but they don't, you know, pull their arms and legs off. So, is that Bigfoot doing that, or is that a dog man? That's anybody's guess, but there's a distinct possibility it could have been a dog, especially when there's known accounts of sightings of dog men, you know, in the area over the years. So, and yeah, I understand they can be very violent, maybe even more so than Bigfoot, you know.
That whole disemboweling thing seems to be one of their trademarks. When you told me about how the guts had been taken out, that made me think instantly that it could very well have been a dogman that did that, unfortunately. That's not the only incident in that area in the Sam Houston that you know about and you've told me about, consequently. There was another incident where people saw a dogman chasing a Bigfoot. Could you tell us about that?
The story, as it was related to me, was there was a group of people that were doing some research in the area, but they had a camp set up, and you know, a pretty good little campfire going. And all of a sudden, they said this juvenile Bigfoot comes running through. It I guess on all fours. It went right through the fire and right on out the other side of the camp. You know, almost knocked their fire out. And they heard a snarl or something, and they turned around and right on the edge of the camp, they said there was a dog man. He was 7, 8 foot tall, standing there, and they were all armed. They opened up on it. It screamed and ran off into the brush. You know, and they know they hit it, but when they went to look, there was no blood. And the next day, they couldn't find any blood. You know, so that seems to be a kind of a common denominator too when people run into these dog men is they shoot it. There doesn't seem to be any blood. You know, you can hurt the thing, but nobody ever comes up with any blood, you know.
That is a really hard one to figure out, but stack it on the list of other things like that we just don't have answers to and are really hard to figure out. Moving on, do you know about any other dogman encounters in that area, whether we're talking about the Sam Houston or the Davy Crockett National Forest?
Well, actually, both. There in Montgomery County, I was told of a story by a couple that lives near Cold Springs, which borders one side of the Sam Houston National Forest there. But they said they had a cousin or a sister-in-law who were coming back home. This was in broad daylight, and they passed by a historic cemetery in the area, and she noticed what she described as a dog man. It seemed to be standing in the cemetery while he was leaning up against a headstone. You know, some of the old historic cemeteries, they have those upright headstones that are 6, 7 feet tall and made out of marble. And it seemed to have 1 foot actually on the base of the headstone. And, you know, her husband had slowed down. You know, they got a pretty good look at it. It was glaring back at them. And, you know, but then they kind of got frightened and he sped on off, you know, at a high rate of speed. You know, they didn't wait around any at all. But that was one of the stories. And another story I heard was actually over in the Davy Crockett National Forest, where a couple was on their way to Houston. They were actually coming down from, I think they had a home up in East Texas somewhere, probably up toward Marshall, Tyler, or someplace up that way. And they'd come down and they were cutting through a portion of Sam Houston National Forest to get over to the interstate. I think they turned down the wrong road. It was a dirt road. And they stopped and turned around. They were sitting there looking at a map, but she had her window down. They heard some noise or movement in the brush to her left. And this is in broad daylight, and what was described as a dog man just stepped out of the brush. And from the way the story goes, it looked as surprised as she was, or they were. You know, when they looked over at it, it was like, what in the heck is this? And then it made a move toward her. And, you know, she had the window down on her truck, and she sped off. And she said she looked in the rearview mirror, and it was standing right there where they had been parked, you know, kind of snarling at them, you know, as they drove off at a high rate of speed, you know.
Yeah, I think I would have left a number 11 on the road, too, if that had happened to me. Well,
I definitely wouldn't want to shake hands with it.
Wasn't there another encounter where a friend of yours had a daughter who ran into one?
Yeah, that was over in Liberty County, which, if you look at a map, you have, along the Trinity River over there, you have, what they call Trinity River Game Preserve. It stretches, it's this fairly wide area of wilderness and swamp, and it stretches north, above Liberty, the town of Liberty, and actually, adjoins a huge area of both big thicket preserve and private land. It's just literally vast miles of nothing but deep forest. And that actually goes on up to near Cleveland, and actually there's woods that actually tie that area in with the Sam Houston National Forest. So it's kind of a big, vast area of forest, wilderness, natural area. But she was coming back from a little town called Anahuac, was heading up to Liberty where she lived, and it was about 7 miles south of the town of Liberty, on the little state highway there, and it was getting right at, the sun was pretty close to setting. It was right at dusk, and she had a little compact car, a small vehicle, and she had her son with her, and this thing shot across the road in front of her. She almost hit it. She had to really bear down on the brakes to keep from hitting it. And her son was hollering at her, you know, hit it, hit it, hit it. But she was afraid this thing was as big as her car, you know. She was afraid that if she hit it, she'd wreck her car, you know. And, of course, when she squalled her tires, the thing looked at her. She said it looked at her with the most glaring, evil eyes she'd ever seen. And the odd thing was it had a small pig or piglet in its mouth as it went across. And, of course, then when it hit the other side of the road, it stood up, stepped over a fence, and kept going. And she said that she didn't really know what she was looking at. She didn't know anything about dog, but she said that the color of the hair and the facial features and all reminded her of a hyena. You know, these things that look kind of like a dog. in Africa. You know, it looked like a giant hyena or something. You know, and it just scared her. Matter of fact, you know, she said her son that was riding with her, he was like 14 years old at the time, and he used to go deer hunting all the time with his dad and all that, but it changed his life. He don't even like to go out in the woods anymore. It just scared him, you know.
Yeah, when you see something like that, it's so hard to conduct business as usual out in the woods. That's totally understandable there. Do you know of any other dogman encounters in Sam Houston or surrounding areas?
I'm trying to think. You know, there was a story years ago where somebody, he had a small farm or ranch or whatever that adjoined the Sam Houston National Forest, and I was told that late one night his livestock was just you know, just really raising Cain, and he had a shotgun with him in a light, a very strong battery powered light. This is probably 30 years ago, whatever, and he went out. Evidently, the cattle, he had a small pasture up closer to the house. He went out and shined the spotlight across, you know, the cattle. He thought maybe there was some coyotes or something in the area that was, his cows were cutting up, you know, mooing, and you could tell they were actually agitated. And when he panned his spotlight across there, supposedly he saw what looked like, he said, it looked like a wolf on two legs, you know, that stood, you know, about 8 foot tall. And, of course, he said that, he had to use both hands to shoot that. He said he dropped the light and fired a shotgun in that direction, you know. And he had like no barrel 12 gauge. He actually fired, I think he fired both barrels in that direction, you know, and he never knew if he hit it or not, you know. He picked the light up, went back in the house, and I don't think he went back out until the next day, you know. And of course there was no evidence of it. I never asked, the people that told me the story, I never asked if he had gone out and tried to locate any tracks, you know. But tracks have been found in and around Sam Houston National Forest, which some people attribute to a dogman, you know. I have there's another guy I know, we're not close friends, I just know him. I've met him several times, and he's had numerous Bigfoot experiences in and around Sam Houston National Forest, and has made a lot of castings of tracks up there, and he's found some pretty interesting stuff. You know, they find 3-toed tracks as well as a regular 5-toed Bigfoot type tracks. And some of them are just really enormous, you know, up to 22.5 inches or so long, you know, just mind-boggling, you know. What's out there, you know, that's the big thing. But evidently there's numerous varieties of these creatures out there. I know over near Cold Springs, which is another area of Sam Houston National Forest, you know, they have accounts over there all the time. Locals encountering what they call hairy giants out there, and there's people coming up missing from time to time, you know, in various places, especially along that Lone Star hiking trail, you know, which is just really odd, you know. People, some of them were very well versed with, you know, the woods, you know, and how to handle yourself. Some of them aren't. And they go out there and you just don't ever see them again. They just disappear. And then authorities bring in dogs and professional trackers and all. And a lot of times they find absolutely nothing. Sometimes they may find a backpack or they may find an abandoned tent, but literally they just disappear.
How long have people been disappearing in that area?
I would say for years. You know, I don't know exactly, but I imagine if you've been keeping records, there's probably records of people disappearing going back to the turn of the century, I would say. And maybe before, who knows, you know. You know, they've all been attributed to one thing or another, but very strange indeed. I know I personally seen back in the woods stapled to a tree, laminated kind of wanted posters. Have you seen missing? This individual. They have a picture other than the description and all that. But there's been campers and hunters. It wasn't too long ago. There was up near one of the big campgrounds that's actually manned. They actually have a ranger where you check in. They have to pay, to go camp there, and they have actually developed campsites where you can park your RV. And there's a portion of the Lone Star Trail that swings down by it, and you have access to that nature trail. And like a 15-year-old girl, she struck off on her own. Nobody's ever seen her again. They haven't been able to find her. So that's just one of those strange phenomenons. It's almost kind of like you see in David Paulides' books, Missing 411. The same thing has been occurring down here in and around the Sam Houston National Forest. People just come up missing under really odd circumstances. Some of it can be explained to some kind of mishap, but a lot of it can't be explained. And it's hard to explain when you don't find a body. But you can call it natural causes, or you can call it some kind of wild animal got them. Whatever kind of wild animal. We do have hogs that are fairly dangerous down here, wild hogs, which run in groups. You might see 20 or 30 of them in a pack. Or you might just see a few of them, 3 or 4 or 5 in a pack. And they can be very dangerous. And you have your bobcats and your mountain lions, but generally, they keep their distance. If you strike off by yourself, you might be singled out as a potential food, I guess. I don't know. But I know I wouldn't go back in there by myself, and I dang sure wouldn't go back in there unarmed. A lot of people that go hiking, you enjoy nature, become one with nature and all that kind of stuff. They really don't have a good understanding of what's out there. I know of another account of the individual. They actually have a Lone Star hiking trail club, and the trail itself extends for right at 100 miles. And he actually left his vehicle near what they call the Huntsville State Park, and went up the Lone Star Trail into the Sam Houston National Forest, all the way as far as Lake Stubblefield. And when he did it on the way in, he actually dropped off and off the trail and hid, bottles of water and little things like that. So on his return run, he'd have little weigh stations. And something got into on his way back. I noticed he had posted on the internet, but something on the way back had got into every one of his little stashes of water bottle and had ripped them open, He said he just barely did make it to the Stubblefield campground where they actually have water hydrants, where he could get water, but it was almost like something didn't want him to make it back out of there, was getting his stashes, But I know near the Stubblefield campground, where the campground there's a bridge crossing down there, and people that fish along that bridge at night have had things thrown at them, and have mentioned of strange screams and howls and stuff back in the woods, to the point where it unnerves them. They end up getting all their fishing gear and leaving. They say, that's enough for me. It seems to be a little inhospitable here.
Yeah, it does sound like a really spooky place. If someone you knew told you that they were thinking about taking a camping trip to the Sam Houston, what would you have to say to them?
I would say, number one, never go by yourself anywhere. Always have one or more people with you. Number two, I would go armed. If you have some kind of firearm, I would keep it with you. Never venture out of camp at night. I would stay pretty close to the fire at night. If you have a tent or whatever. Myself, after my experiences, I don't tent camp. I realize there's something bigger than me out there, and I think when you venture off on your own, you're adding yourself to the food chain. And I would have to have a self-contained camper to feel comfortable out there. Is what I can tell you. But it's a fun place in the daylight. But when that sun goes down, it becomes an entirely different place. Almost a Jurassic Park-like environment or Jurassic World. And the big thing is you can't see. But whatever is out there, they can see you. They seem to have the ability, like so many animals, to see in the dark. And unless you have some kind of special night vision or something, these things can creep up pretty close to you and be on top of you without you even knowing it. I just say be on your guard, be watchful, and be aware of what's around you, because there's other dangers out there. There's some pretty good sized rattlesnakes, there's pretty good sized cottonmouth water moccasins out there, all of which kill for a living. If you especially get up around that water, which water draws other animals, which is game, which is food for whatever's out there, I don't care what it might be, whether it be a bobcat or mountain lion, which we do have a number of them out there. But again, you get near water, you're gonna have poisonous snakes, and you just got to be careful, because one of those bites you, and you're in serious trouble. And if you're off by yourself and a good ways away from, say, you're hiking and you're a good ways away from a vehicle, it may kill you. You may not make it out of there alive. Hogs, if you break a leg or whatever, hogs come in there and they'll actually devour you. They don't care. They attack each other. They eat their own young sometimes. These wild hogs have invaded Texas, and they're actually becoming a nuisance to the point to where there's some places where they're actually going up a helicopter and hunting them from helicopter for sport. I guess the better ones, they are all out for a very good barbecue.
Because of your encounter there, Gary, you mentioned not being able to camp out in a tent, but what other kind of changes have you made, and what other kind of things that you used to do can you no longer do?
Oh, well, I used to be able to walk out there in the middle of the night when I was younger. Now that I know what I know, I won't just blatantly walk through I was actually at risk. I was putting my life on the line going out there by myself. Of course, when you're young, you feel like you're bulletproof and 10 foot tall. And you thought, well, the most you got out there is a bobcat or mountain lion or something like that. We've actually got more mountain lions out there now than we've had in years, mainly because in the past we had a drought in West Texas, and we had a series of wildfires that drove a lot of the mountain lions east into East Texas. And there's plenty of game, plenty of cover, and they stayed. But basically, I just don't feel safe in a tent. We can be out there, you can have 5 or 6 well-armed people with you, and I still, I get nervous when the sun goes down. When that sun gets close to the horizon, I'm heading home or into a motel. I don't have the confidence I once had when I was younger. When you're 16, 17, 18 years old, you weren't scared of anything. One time, me and 2 other fellas, we drove a good distance back into the Sam Houston National Forest. We had a Volkswagen van, And that was one of those scenarios where when I stopped for the night, I should have turned it around. I didn't. And we had a heavy rain, which Texas is known for. Yeah, sometimes it'll rain all week long. We get 10, 15 inches of rain. And where I was at turned into a sea of mud. And we spent 3 days literally digging ourselves out and getting the thing turned around. So where we didn't have any encounters with a dogman or Bigfoot, we were heavily armed. We had forgotten the axe, and I was really using a 12-gauge shotgun with slugs. I think I went through about 10 boxes that I had with me, but literally using a shotgun to blast little saplings down to use to put under the tires of the vehicle, and also to get it turned around, just trying to get it up to some high ground. And we had to use a jack, and had to jack one end of the Volkswagen up and put stuff under the wheels, and then jack the other end of the panel van up, put stuff under the wheels, and then crank it up, and we'd run it about 30 feet and down to the frame again, and that went on for 3 days. The fact that I was shooting the gun so much, blasting these little saplings and stuff down, I often wonder, and Mike Woolley had suggested that might be, and I think even Bob Garrett had, I was on one of his radio shows one time, and he even suggested that was probably the reason why we didn't get bothered, because we were blasting our guns so much back there that they were kind of keeping their distance,
Well, they might have been keeping their distance there, Gary, but I guarantee you they were watching the show.
Yeah, I'm sure they were, There was 3 crazy guys back there blasting their guns in the trees, I know when we finally got back up to the Stubblefield campground, they had, the people that were camped out there, this during hunting season, and they could, for 3 days I heard the roar of the engine of my van, and the constant gunfire going on out there for 3 days. And so they weren't able to get any hunting in either, because we were scaring all the game out of the country, And they were sure glad to see us when we got back to camp. And of course, the van itself was unrecognizable. It was entirely covered with mud. There were just like 2 little viewing ports out through the windshield, where the windshield wipers had made a kind of a smeary area to look out. And and we'd run out of food. We were so hungry. I remember we drove into Huntsville, and we pulled into a Sonic drive-in, and this huge bunch of mud just fell off my bumper onto the ground there. And the girl that came out to service our burger, she wouldn't get with it. We were all covered in mud. And she handed it to us. She wouldn't get near us, Oh, man.
Yeah, sounds like you guys had one heck of a time out there. One of those situations you're awfully glad to get out of, though, which I can't say I'll blame you there.
That was a mistake. But hey, when you're just a kid, we're talking 1971 here, you do a lot of crazy things, and you later regret. I'm just glad that we didn't have an encounter, even a violent encounter. I mean, we were heavily armed. We would have... I guarantee you, if it had shown itself, if a Bigfoot had got after us or a dogman had got after us, we may not have killed it, but I definitely would have sent it away with a long winter bellyache. I can tell you that.
I've been hearing about things that have been going on in that park for quite some time now. I'm wondering, do you feel any kind of frustration when you think about the apparent dangers found in that park, and the lack of warning the general public gets about those dangers?
Well, yeah, I guess the frustration is that there's something going on out there. There's people that are getting hurt out there, and the total disregard for safety, in the Sam Houston National Forest, And of course, I can't point my finger at the Forest Service so much. It's just, it just seems like that they're I don't know how to explain it. It just seems like that there should be more warning for people that go out there, especially about the dangers in the woods and what could potentially disrupt their camping experience, and it could very well be deadly. There's a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, you're smoking dope or something." There's nothing out there, but not until you actually see it or have an encounter does that whole frame of mind change. That you suddenly realize that, oh my God, the blinders come off. Another thing you see out of the tree, I used to see it when I was younger all the time out there, but the trees, what they call tree structures, or you see evidence where these things go through, and you see actually trees bent over and broke off, or stacked in funny piles, or groups. When I was younger, I would see all this stuff, and I would think to myself, well, that's kind of odd how the wind did that. But now, after all these years, and seeing photographs and listening to stories of what other people have encountered all across the country, whether they're interested in Dogman or Bigfoot, it just suddenly dawns on you that, wow, these things have always been out there, that I remember seeing this stuff before, and it's, I don't know how to explain it. It's just, you start really getting a kind of a feeling of foreboding, all of a sudden it's like, what's going on here,
Yeah, when you consider all the strange things that are happening and have happened with people turning up missing and whatnot, it just doesn't seem right that more warnings not put out there to hopefully prevent more people from falling victim like others have in the past.
Yeah. Well, the most I've seen is basically the missing persons posters that they put out on the trees. Generally, speaking, I've talked to a friend of mine that lives up there, Sheila. She says that she used to work for paramedics in the area. She says generally, a person will come up missing, and it'll be in the newspaper, and there'll be somewhat of a pretty extensive search. Well, when they don't find anything, it's just kind of forgotten, and of course that name of that person goes on to a missing persons report or file, and that's the last you ever hear of it. It's just like, that's it. That's the end of the story, Bob, Garrett, and Tim and them, they've actually come across camps, abandoned, along the Lone Star hiking trail, places back in there. And nobody around. And they'll come back, a week later, and they're still there. It's the way they were left. And something run these people out of there. Now, whether these people escaped alive or whatever, we don't know, but some of these tents are very expensive, We're talking several $100 tents. And people just don't go off and leave all their possessions, especially a tent that they've worked hard at probably buying, But you do find that kind of stuff out there, just abandoned camps,
Speaking of those abandoned camps there, Gary, the most famous one in that area has to be the Torn Up Camp. Do you have any opinions on whether it was a Dogman, a Bigfoot, or what else that was behind that?
I really couldn't tell you as far as, it's a possibility. I'm leaning toward Bigfoot, just from the stories I've heard from various people that were there right after that event occurred. And of course, I, like everybody else, have seen the videos that they had taken, Bob and them had taken, not only the night of that event, but the next morning, and then months later, after the Forest Service had gone in and cleaned up the camp, and removed all evidence of anything occurring, including all the bent over trees and broken branches and stuff, where it looked like something that literally had gone crazy. and just devastated the area. There's no evidence of it there anymore, you know. Knowing that there are dogmen in the area, you could go either way with something like that. But, of course, the tore-up camp, I would lean to the fact that that was probably a Bigfoot. Might have been more than once, you know. I know there's corridors through Sam Houston National Forest that these things travel. I think they travel back and forth, actually, all the way from East Texas, you know, and I think these things probably basically following the food chain, you know, following wherever what would you call it, the best eating facility is. You know, if you got an area where there's a lot of hogs, they'll probably, because they do eat hog, you know, they'll follow the herds, you know, as they wander through the forest. You know, same thing with the deer. You know, if you find a lot of deer, there's gonna be a Bigfoot nearby, because in my opinion, they're ambush predators.
Yeah, with all that food supply, like you said, it would have to be a smorgasbord for any big predator like that in the area, so that does make good sense.
If you look at the size of a Bigfoot or a dogman, they are going to have to eat a lot to maintain that body mass. So they're going to stay near whatever the food source is. And if it's deer or if it's wild hogs or whatever it may be, I know some of the Bigfoot creatures, they also eat other, you know, nuts, berries and things like that. That's not necessarily a main course, but that's just kind of an appetizer, so to speak, because of their size, they have to eat a lot, and they have to kill a lot, in other words, you know. So they're going to be following, you know, the food wherever it's more plentiful.
Yeah, when you're talking about bodies that big, it would take an awful lot of calories to sate them and keep them going. There's no denying that. Gary, it's about time to wrap this show up. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I've enjoyed the program and your past shows and things I've listened to, but I've got really interested in the whole dogman genre, and I can tell you that it's fascinating to me, you know. In a lot of ways, I'm glad I haven't come into a face-to-face encounter with one of those things, you know. I don't really know if I want to.
Oh, I know the answer to that. You definitely don't want to have a face-to-face with one of these things. Well, Gary, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and sharing those stories and all that info with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I really have.
Thanks again. I really appreciate it, and you have yourself a great night.
Okay, maybe we can talk again sometime.
That sounds good. We'll have to do that sometime.
All right.
We'll see ya.
Take care.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.